What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode with the Crimson Connective. I'm your guy, Alex Markham. Over the next little while, we're going to be slowly rolling out some different style podcasts for you guys. This next one, I'm extremely excited to be able to put out. Everybody gets obsessed over stats, right? But it's about making the thing fun as well. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with Joseph Silverzweig for a whole bunch of years now. I think dating back to about 2016. Everybody goes to him for his statistically speaking pieces. He can go a lot deeper than that too. I absolutely love it, and it's pretty crazy scary when it comes to how accurate his stuff can be. Maybe not all is on a week to week basis, but over time and how it bears out. So what I wanted to do with this, what we decided to do is also team him up with Matt Patton, who's been great with numbers, and also you guys will find him big on Twitter or X when it comes to the threads and breaking down a bunch of the stats and numbers that way. So wanted to do a unique concept here where Joe's taking his numbers as well as Matt's taking some of the numbers and some of the things that he's finding with arguments from the opposing team, and really kind of break that down and get their thoughts on it and come to different conclusions and see if they end up being right or wrong from a weekly basis. So without further ado, I just want to thank these guys for being a part of this. I think that everybody's going to find that it's going to be a fun podcast over time here. So without further ado, take it away, guys.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. We're super excited to be here. Super excited to be talking stats and Utah football. This edition is really going to be focused on a statistical take. I think a lot of you folks know me from Twitter, where I have been waxing mathematical about Utah football for years and years and years. I'm excited to bring that to the Crimson Collective here, Crimson Connective. Matt, do you want to tell them a little bit about your background?
Yeah, yep. I just love jumping into the numbers too, and I love seeing just all the analysis before a game and figuring out just as close as we can get. Obviously, you never know exactly what's going to happen. We're dealing with college-age athletes, and even if you have some turnovers in a game, everything just can change right away. So just excited to be able to break it down. I hope that we can present something that's a little bit different than what's typically produced and what you usually will see. Hopefully by seeing some of these numbers that we present to you, it'll give you a better insight into the game and what you can expect.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Well, why don't you start? I think we were talking a little bit before the recording here, and I think we've got a little bit of a different perspective on how this game's going. So why don't you hit it with your analysis and the numbers that you're looking at, and then I'll start to talk about what's popped out to me when I started this analysis this week.
All right. So I think a big thing that's been discussed a lot on Twitter lately is the spread for this game. When it first came out, I think it was a 9-point spread in the Utes' favor. And then it dropped all the way down to 4.5 with the news that Cam Rising may not play. And then it jumped back up. I think it's back up to about 6.5-point spread right now. So I'm actually I really feel like Utah has a very good chance in this game. And I go beyond that spread by quite a bit. And there's quite a few factors why. It's fun as I jump in there on Twitter. I get a lot of guff from these Florida fans. They keep trying to remind me how big and fast their players are. And I don't doubt that. SEC teams are always full of good recruits. A lot of 4 stars, 5 stars on their team. But this Florida team, it's nothing like the team that Utah saw last year. It's completely different, and I think that's the big knock that I have against Florida, and why I think Utah, even if they don't have Cam Rising, has a good chance in this game. I'll throw out some numbers. The first thing is their offensive line. I've focused on this a lot because I think everything kind of begins and ends in the trenches, and their offensive line, it's a completely new group this season. Their one returning starter I don't want to say his name wrong. It's Princely Iguitkin. I have no idea how to say that. I'm sure I'll be corrected by some Florida fans, but it's looking like he's going to miss the game as well. He sustained a knee injury in fall camp. And so they have 5 brand new guys on the team. They brought in a couple transfers that they're hoping can make a big impact. But even those new transfers have only had a few starts. They've got some good depth. But again, this 5 new guys playing together for the first time in a game. And if your offensive line can't protect very well, that's going to impact the run game, which I'm sure they wanted to rely on quite a bit. And then, of course, the quarterback game. So that's the other big thing. Florida brought in Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. Mertz has been a 3-year starter over at Wisconsin, so he's got a lot of experience, but that experience hasn't necessarily been good. He hasn't thrown a lot of touchdowns to interceptions. He gets sacked a lot. Let's see the total numbers. He threw 38 touchdowns and 26 interceptions when he was at Wisconsin, and he had a 19-13 record. So it's not like they're bringing in one of the top quarterbacks in the nation from the transfer portal. The other thing is he does get sacked quite a bit. He was sacked 23 times last season, and considering that Utah is one of the better teams in the nation at getting sacks, now you take an offensive line that's brand new, you get a quarterback that isn't very elusive, and then you have a defense like Utah. I just see that as a recipe for disaster for Florida, especially when they're in their first non-conference game outside of the state of Florida since 1991. So they're going to be an elevation that they've never experienced. I don't like it. I don't like Florida's chances, and I see Utah actually winning this easily, even without Cam Rising.
All right. Well, I'll take the role of being the bring back down to earth guy. I see this as a pretty reasonable line right now. I think they made a good adjustment for Cam Rising, the market after it swung back. Statistically, when you see a player of Rising's caliber go out and be replaced by some average quarterback, you're usually going to see a drop in total scoring. It's usually about 4 points. It's usually the difference between scoring a touchdown on one drive and settling for a field goal on that drive, and whether that's the sack that Cam Rising would have taken or that long pass that he would have hit. But it's usually about 4.5 points. So I think the shift in the line makes sense to me. I agree. There's a ton of uncertainty when it comes to Florida. We really don't know what we're getting. For the most part, we're getting a lot of known pieces here with the Utes. Bill Connolly of Football Outsiders, I think, had him at 74% returning, which is one of the highest percent sort of returning production in the country. So we've got a pretty darn good idea what we're gonna get with the Utes. There are a couple of question marks. I think one big one for me is left tackle. We don't know who's going to be playing quarterback, but we know he's either going to be Cam Rising and maybe in a leg brace, maybe just not as mobile as we're used to, a little bit slowed down, or it's going to be a kid who's just learning the game and who's going to be susceptible to pressure. So you can expect whoever we run out there, Florida's going to be attacking that freshman left tackle that we've got, he's getting great reviews in camp, and I hope nothing more than that he's going to go on to a great career. I wish him all the best. But when you are a true freshman, and it is your first game under the big lights, and that is just a really, really challenging environment to be in. There's a huge learning curve, and my default is I expect him to be an average left tackle for the University of Utah, and that's a good player, but that's a player who is going to be really vulnerable as a true freshman and is going to give up some big plays. So I do see a real vulnerability there for the offense. Defense is loaded and stable, and a lot of players that we've seen before. And I agree that the Florida offense is going to have their hands full. Absolutely. I don't have Florida winning this game. Utah's got the home field advantage. They've got a lot of advantages. So I do think that they should be favored. But the reality is, when you don't know about a team like Florida, you say, well, they're probably going to be about Florida average, right? Well, what's average for Florida? And if we stop at the Urban Meyer years, we don't want to include that because that was an outlier, right? Not good for details. But if you look at them over the last few years since Urban Meyer left, on average, this is a team that is about 2.5 to 3 touchdowns better than an average football team. right? Which is better than the Utes are probably going to be this year. The Utes are going to be in the 2 to just over 2 touchdowns better than average this year. And so if Florida puts together their average performance over the last decade or so, they're probably overall going to be a better team than Utah when all is said and done.
Now, that said, you're right. It's a new season.
They're still gelling. They've got a lot to figure out. Utah's a really good team, and they get the big advantage of playing at home. From a home field advantage tends to be strongest when the distance traveled by the visiting team is longer. So the home field advantage, for example, of
Heading up the road, like BYU has to
sometimes come up to Utah or Utah down to BYU, doesn't have as big of an impact as these multi-thousand miles. And I was reading somewhere they're not getting to fly on their normal flights, and they're having to do all this stuff. And so that home field advantage is going to be impactful.
Yeah, I have to wonder, when you take out kind of the non-statistical side of things, for example, a hurricane is headed its way right now into Florida. And so they did have to adjust their travel plans. They're flying into Dallas today, I believe is what I saw. And then they're going to then fly into Utah tomorrow because they wanted to be here just a day before. I do wonder from a mental standpoint, how much that's going to impact the players. If they're going to be concerned at all about this hurricane hitting pretty strong. I mean, Gainesville's in the middle of the state, but it's still a lot of rain, a lot of flooding. Yeah. So that might be on their minds as well. So you have to wonder about that.
I know that's real. I mean, those are real issues, and I think they may really have an impact on the game. But where I come from is always, well, what do we know? What can we predict? What can we project? And so what I'm projecting is this is going to be your average of the last decade or so Florida team, which is really, really good. Their records aren't always great, but they're in a conference where they have to play teams that are just unbelievably good all the time, and so they get their butts kicked a lot. But when they play other teams, they tend to do really well, and I've got them a reasonable chance of winning this game. So these statistics that I pulled up are where my numbers come down, right? I've got Utah winning this game 71% of the time. So they play 100 games, they win 71 of them. You can see the score distribution here. So that line, that taller flag there, that's 0. So obviously teams don't tie in football, but in my model, teams tie all the time. They get 0. They tie out all the time. And most of the line here is on the right side. That big hump means Utah's likely to win. But that scoring margin's not that huge. I only had the Utes covering that 6.5 point line exactly 50% of the time, which is usually how these things work out. Vegas is really good at finding that spot. Not a ton of value on this line. That said, if I were a betting man, I would probably bet on Florida to cover this line because we have more uncertainty in the negative direction for Utah. It's possible that Cam Rising is going to come out there and he's going to play out of his mind, and he's going to throw for a bunch of touchdowns, and we're going to we're going to see Florida get run off the field, or could Nate Johnson comes out and it turns out he's the phenom that Utah fans hope that he is, and they run Florida off the field that way. But there's also a chance that those guys are not going to be themselves, and that Florida is going to be able to get to them, and there's going to be turnovers and other problems. So I think if I'm going to pick a score for this, and somebody's going to kind of pin me down, I'm probably going to say Utes win by 4.5, 5. I maybe pick a final score of somewhere in the 33-28 range. I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks and a lot of points scored in this game, and the Utes are going to come out on top. But ultimately, it's going to come down to 1 or 2 plays. And if I were betting, I think take Florida to cover, just because my model doesn't price in these injuries and uncertainty at quarterback for the Utes, and that does take some points off the top.
Yeah, I wonder, like with your model, does it factor in with what you ran? Does that factor in a freshman left tackle, or does that factor in if they were to put in a previous starter? Because I do see this where if they do start the freshman, then and it doesn't go well for the first few snaps, they've got a couple guys that have starts that could jump right in.
Yeah. So this model is I don't want to say it's simple, but it does not react. It's not reactive. It doesn't react to news. The model is about the statistical performance of these teams over time, and with a weighting for how new coaches or different coaches have performed. So for example, Utah gets a real benefit from having had such a long time of Coach Whittingham outperforming his statistical expectations with advanced statistical metrics like S&P Plus, FPI. It also uses the Vegas line to set some of these, because those guys know what they're doing, and they tend to be right more often than they're wrong. But it doesn't price in things like injuries or new talent. It only includes recruiting to the extent that the advanced metrics do. So recruiting is not really factored. It is only factored in that way. So I think that we'll see, and for all those reasons, we kind of price all that stuff in. What I find is it's a little bit more likely that Utah is going to underperform their statistical expectation in this game than that they're going to overperform it, which is why I tend to lean on one like this where the line is right at 50-50. It's where I tend to lean for Florida. So it's my pricing in those things at the end of the day. But the model itself, the numbers that I'm showing you, they don't reflect that.
Got it. You know, it's interesting. I mean, we saw this last year. Utah was highly ranked, I think number 7 at the time when they went into Florida. On paper, it seemed like they should win, and everything you've said. You know, there were mistakes made. The defense didn't play the way that they typically should and would, and it kind of came down to that last play where there was that interception. So you never do know. I'm looking at it still. I still think Utah wins big. I look at this and I just see. I think Mertz will get sacked somewhere around 5 times. I'm not just throwing that number out. In his 2 games last year that he struggled the most, it was against Iowa and Illinois. Iowa had 35 sacks for the season. Illinois had 28. Utah they had 38 last season. So in the Iowa game, Mertz was sacked 4 times and he threw 2 interceptions. And in the Illinois game, he was sacked 5 times and threw 2 interceptions. So I kind of look at that as a good baseline. And I think Utah would do something similar. They're a little bit better defenses. Iowa's one of the better defenses in the nation. So I think they're right up there. Some of those outlets, you know, like Pick 6 previews, they've said Utah's got the number 1 defense in the Pac-12. They've given the linebackers number 1 in the Pac-12, D-line number 1 in the Pac-12, defensive backs number 1 in the Pac-12. PFF has the Utah linebacker group at number 10. So I just see this as just a game where I think Florida's offense is going to have a hard time getting going. I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on Mertz, especially in this kind of an atmosphere. So I see this as a game where Utah hasn't lost at home really since 2018. They lost in the COVID season when it was their first game, and the Trojans had already played 3 games. So I kind of throw that one out. So Utah hasn't lost at home in a long time. They've beaten some really good teams, but all these teams are Pac-12 teams that they've beaten at home. They're big wins over those 5 years. So bringing in an SEC team, albeit they were 6-7 last season, so they're a bit of an average SEC team right now. But I think Utah's going to do a great job because of that new offensive line that they have and Utah's ability to attack. So I see this even if you have a Nate Johnson or a Bryson Barnes at quarterback instead of Cam Rising. I think with the rushing attack that Utah should bring heavily with some of the new weapons, I see this as a much higher scoring for Utah, but not for Florida. As I kept looking at the numbers and seeing who they had, I just don't see who Florida is gonna put up a bunch of points. So I'm going for a very high. I'm going 38-17 Utah. So way far away from what the Vegas line's saying. Really far away from your prediction, and we'll see. We'll see after this game if what it looked like on paper or if all these new holes that Florida's thrown together actually works. I mean, they've just thrown together so many new pieces on every unit. I think their cornerbacks are the only ones that have returned. The safeties are new. Many linebackers are new. A bunch of new receivers. I just see this as a team that maybe could compete better with Utah midway through the season, but it's going to take them some time to figure things out. And starting off against a highly ranked Utah team is probably not the best formula for a win for Florida.
Well, I certainly think that Utah fans are going to hope that your prediction is more accurate than mine. And I as always, I play out 100,000 seasons in a spreadsheet where these games go. But I like to watch the real thing. So I'm really interested to see how these games are going to adjust my assumptions and my expectations for both of these teams. This is a game where I expect expectations for Florida are going to shift a lot more than they will for Utah. But it's going to be really interesting, really fun. It's just good to have football back. I'm excited.
Absolutely.
Well, Matt, this was good. This is our first go inauguration here, but excited to be back. I don't know what day, but right around the same time next week to talk about next week's game and to eat my hat if I need to. I'm planning to hold myself accountable all year long.
Hey, I'm taking the bigger risk. I like that you've got a 71% chance basically for Utah. That's a good thing. But no, we stuck our heads out there a bit, and we'll see what Utah can do.
All right. Will you see everybody next week?
Yep, we'll see you. Thanks a lot.